Okay, so this is the easy part. We're gonna go into Mudbox. So open up whatever you're working on, whether it's your crate or whatever else you guys are doing. I'm just gonna work with this little box here for now, just because I don't want to open up my crate because it's heavy. Um, so take your high poly and export it as an OBJ. Um, Sometimes you're gonna want multiple high polys, which is totally okay. You can make as many objects as you want. Obviously, the more you make, the more you're gonna have to deal with, but um, whatever, whatever you have is fine. So export your high poly. If you have floaters, you can export those separately if you feel you're going to want to work on them in Mudbox at all. If you don't, then you don't really have to worry about them. So why do we export things separately sometimes? Well, one, floaters we export separately because they need to get rendered on a separate pass so they don't cause shadows and stuff like that. The other times you might want to export stuff separately is if you have something, let's say on my crate, the real one that I made, um, I have like handles on the side, right? So they kind of do this little thing here. Let's just extrude this, right? So whatever, my handles kind of do like a little thing where they kind of come out the top and then go over the side. So what happens is when things are really close together like that, sometimes when you're doing low poly captures, this front part might capture this box, or vice versa. This under part might capture this thing if the projections aren't working properly. So we export them separately, we bake them separately, that way you don't get any of those errors. And B, if you export them separately into Mudbox, if I want to work on this handle and this was all one object, I would be like inside this box. Then I'd have to like mask this out. It gets to be a pain in the butt. If they're separate objects, you just select your main thing, hide it in Mudbox, and then you can just work on this thing on its own on the inside and all that. So keep that in mind when you're breaking your stuff up. A for like baking, B for workflow, and C sometimes just for performance, because when you start adding up shit, it gets really heavy. I know I did that with my crate, and I mean this is an older machine, and it like does not like it being one object, even though it's just a box with a couple cuts in it. I mean it's like a billion poly box with some cuts in it, but still, it doesn't like it. So yeah, the more is good sometimes. So it depends on what you want to do. So when we export into Mudbox, just go to File, Export. You can do export selected, and save it wherever you like. You can export as FBX or OBJ. I typically like doing OBJs. I've had less problems with them for some reason. I don't remember what the problem I was having with FBXs, but it was bringing in some weird geo or data or some shit. So, you know, name it whatever you want it to name it, and you know, have a folder ready. I'm just going to throw my stuff on the desktop, which you can for now if you want, because I would just delete the exports later anyways. Or you could have a folder that's all, you know, labeled as exported or export meshes or whatever, and export that guy. You don't really have to do any fancy settings. I usually turn the log off because I don't give a crap. You can remove export materials and create library. You don't need that stuff too. And you can turn off the optimizations if you want as well. So export that. It'll bring up this little thing here. Once it says done, hit done. If you try, so a lot of times when you're exporting like really low poly stuff, this export box will come up really quick and say done. So you can kind of go export and then hit enter. If it takes a long time with your high poly stuff and these things are filling up while they're calculating, if you hit enter, it'll cancel it. Just by default, the cancel button is highlighted, which I've done many times. And so the fun thing is it'll like delete your mesh too from your export. So if you've exported and you've named the crate and it's in your Windows file and you want to re-export over top of that, if you cancel it, it'll actually delete that mesh. It's not a big deal, but it's slightly annoying. Anyways, so once you're done that, export, you shut down 3D Max or keep it open if your machine's mighty enough. And I have attempted to open Mudbox in the background. It may have opened. Yes, it did. A second. That's okay. All right. So you open up Mudbox. Now by default, you're going to have. Let me see if I can bring up this home screen again. Oh, no, I immediately regret my decision. Something else. Anyways, so you're going to open up Mudbox. It's going to come up with this little panel that has some default meshes in it, like a human, a sphere, a box. So if you're practicing and stuff, you can practice off of one of those guys. And on the right-hand side, it will have like a little open feature with a list of any meshes that you have worked on previously. So you can select your mesh in there if you've done so already. Just give me 1 second here. Why is this disappearing? Alright. Alright, so if that window or box or whatever is gone, you can just go to File and Import. Select your mesh. So I'm going to select my crate that I actually exported. And this might take a little bit of time depending on your machine and the complexity of your mesh. On the bottom left, you'll see it's doing its importing file, which is not green. And we wait. Okay, cool. So sometimes you might get some errors where it'll detect problems, and it's actually nice. It'll list you a bunch of problems that you might be having. So if it complains about UVs and you don't care about actually texturing your mesh in Mudbox, then you just ignore those. Sometimes it'll give you an error for like a lot of edges connecting to a vert, which again, it doesn't really like subdividing. So if you do have one of those things, you know, that's good to know. So there's a bunch of errors. It really depends on what these errors are. If it's not a big deal, you just say keep this mesh, and it might give you some warnings if your mesh is really subdivided. And you wait, and eventually it will show up in your scene. Again, my computer's slow, so pardon me. But anyways, that's pretty much it for importing. So once it's imported, you'll be ready to go. Save an actual scene of your Mudbox scene because it is heavy, so it might crash. So make sure you do that nicely. There you go. Once it's imported. Oh, I already started painting on it by accident. There we go. So that's what your stuff should look like. You'll get little red marks if you're having any errors. And I'm having errors on my round stuff because it has that like really high density, like it's one vert with a ton of edges, which I don't care about. This little thing is a little concerning. I don't know why it's giving me a little red error just on this one edge here. If it's a concern, you can go back into Max and you know, see what's up. And if you don't care, then you just move on with your life. So, all right, so that's importing stuff into Mudbox, and we'll continue in a second.